Think your life is hard? Try surviving just one day in medieval times. No phone, no shower, no toilet paper. You're filthy, starving, tipsy by mid-morning from weak ale and praying you don't catch the plague by nightfall. Welcome to the Dark Ages, where survival wasn't a metaphor, it was the entire point. Let's start with food, because you wouldn't get far without it. Forget what you've seen in movies. No overflowing tables, no golden turkey legs. Unless you were nobility, meals were grim, repetitive, and often borderline inedible. Most peasants lived on something called pottage. It was a watery stew of boiled grains and whatever vegetables hadn't rotted yet. Leftovers? It was all leftovers. The pot stayed on the fire for days. No fridge, no variety, just one endless medieval soup loop. Bread was everywhere, but it wasn't fluffy or fresh. It was dense, dark, and filled with grit. Literally. Millstones would chip during grinding, meaning every bite came with a sprinkle of crushed rock. Dental work? Try chewing on pebbles 3 times a day and see how long your enamel lasts. Even worse, bread made from rye was often laced with ergot, a fungus that can cause hallucinations, burning sensations, seizures, and death. Entire towns would trip out together. Some historians think this helped fuel the witch trial hysteria. Imagine accusing your neighbor of sorcery because your loaf of bread made you see demons. Meat? Rare and risky. With no refrigeration, meat spoiled fast. The rich masked it with expensive spices. Everyone else? Held their breath and hoped for the best. You know the 5-second rule? Back then, it was more like the 5-day rule. And you couldn't even wash it down with clean water. Rivers and wells were often contaminated with human waste. Drinking from them was asking for dysentery. Instead, everyone drank ale, including kids. Weak, but safer than water. One study estimates the average peasant drank about 8 pints a day. Children as young as 5 sipped beer at every meal. Fish was safer, sometimes. If you lived near the coast, maybe you got something fresh. If not, it was dried or salted, and by the time it reached you, it smelled like a corpse. Let's say all that food made its way through your system. Now what? No indoor plumbing, no toilets, no privacy. The average person used a chamber pot, a literal pot. Keep it under the bed, use it when needed, then dump it in the street. That was standard practice. In cities, people would open their windows, shout, "Gardez-le," a twisted version of the French garde à l'eau, and toss the contents directly into the street. Streets were open sewers, and if it rained, it all flowed downhill. Welcome to living in a toilet bowl. If you were lucky enough to visit a castle, you might get a guard robe, a seat with a hole that emptied down the side of the wall. In Dover Castle, one dropped waste 70 feet straight down. Kings had thrones, but they still pooped into the wind. Public toilets existed, sort of. Some towns had communal privies over rivers, but they were rare. For everyone else, it was find a corner, use a bucket, or squat in an alley. Gong farmers, yes, real job title, collected waste at night and hauled it outside city walls. Their pay was surprisingly high, but the stench stuck to them so badly they were banned from public spaces. That's how bad things smelled. People got paid a fortune just to deal with it. Toilet paper didn't exist. People wiped with moss, leaves, scraps of cloth, or just their hand. Richer folks used wool or hemp. But most relied on what was available, and often, that wasn't much. Even if you survived dinner and didn't get trampled by falling chamber pots, you still had to work, hard. Most people were peasants, toiling from sunup to sundown. No weekends, no paid leave, just relentless physical labor. Fields had to be plowed with wooden tools, seeds sown by hand, crops harvested under the blazing sun. Harvest season meant 16-hour days, no shade, no breaks. The average medieval farm worker burned over 4,000 calories per day just staying alive. Not from exercise, just from existing in medieval conditions. If you weren't farming, maybe you were a blacksmith choking on smoke, or a tanner soaking hides in urine and dog dung. It paid so poorly you couldn't even afford the bread with rocks. Children started apprenticeships as early as 7, worked 6 days a week, for up to 14 years, and after that, still broke. Even the lucky ones had it rough. Everyone was either exhausted, injured, or dying. There were no safety standards, no protective gear, and no one to sue when things went wrong, which they always did. Let's say you got sick, caught a cold, got a fever, twisted an ankle. Now you're really in trouble. Medical knowledge? Basically non-existent. Most illnesses were blamed on bad air, or imbalances in the 4 bodily humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. The cure? Bloodletting. As in, cut you open and let it pour out. Fever? Too much blood. Toothache? Still too much blood. Stubbed toe? Guess what, you need fewer fluids. Leeches were the hot new treatment. Doctors would slap a bunch on your skin to suck out the bad blood. One medical text suggested 70 leeches, at once, 70. Worse yet, some medicines were pure poison. Mercury was prescribed for everything from syphilis to skin problems. And since no one understood germs, surgical tools weren't cleaned, and infections were common. Hospitals, they were just places to go die more slowly. 1 in 5 patients didn't make it out. Childbirth, often fatal. The average life expectancy was about 30 to 40 years, if you were lucky. Toothache, no dentist. Just a guy with pliers who waited for your screams to reach a certain pitch before yanking. No anesthesia, no hygiene, just grit your teeth, assuming you had any left. Let's say you avoided food poisoning, plague, and accidental decapitation. Now let's talk law and order. There were laws, sort of. But they varied wildly from town to town. What was fine in one village could get you killed in the next. And nobody told you the rules, you just had to guess. Minor crimes like stealing bread could get your hand chopped off. In some places, chopping down a tree in the wrong forest was punishable by death. That's not a metaphor. That's medieval forestry law. Trials? Hilarious if they weren't so deadly. There was trial by hot iron, carry a burning metal bar 9 feet. If your wounds healed nicely, you were innocent. If they got infected, which they always did, guilty. Or trial by water, get tied up and thrown in a river. Sink, innocent but dead. Float, guilty and still dead. Their logic? Water would reject evil. You were basically fighting gravity for your life, and if you were found guilty, public torture and execution, drawing and quartering, hanging, beheading, people brought their kids. It was entertainment, bring a pie, watch a guy lose his intestines, fun for the whole family. The rich could often buy their way out or demand trial by combat, which meant hiring a stronger guy to fight on your behalf. Justice for sale. The poor? Good luck. Hope you like the smell of burning rope. Now, if disease or the justice system didn't get you, war probably would. Movies show knights in shiny armor charging gloriously into battle. Reality? Total chaos. Screaming. Mud. Limbs flying. Armor was absurdly expensive, worth as much as a modern sports car. So unless you were nobility, you fought with padded rags, maybe a metal plate if you were lucky, and whatever blunt farm tool could double as a weapon. Swords were for the rich. The rest swung axes, spears, or pitchforks. And if you were on the receiving end of a longbow, too bad. Arrows could punch through most armor, and English longbowmen trained from childhood, their skeletons warped from years of pulling 200-pound bows. Battles weren't rare. The 100 Years' War lasted 116 years. That's entire generations growing up with constant conflict. And even if you didn't fight, armies traveled through villages stealing food, killing livestock, and sometimes burning the whole place down. Sieges were worse. You'd be trapped inside a castle or city for weeks, even months, slowly starving. People resorted to eating rats, pets, even corpses. When they finally surrendered, the invading army might still massacre everyone inside, just for fun. Infectious disease spread like wildfire in camps. Poor sanitation, spoiled food, and thousands of unwashed bodies packed together made the perfect breeding ground. More soldiers died from infection than from swords. And if you got wounded, hope you like cauterizing irons and saws. Because your arm wasn't getting saved, it was getting cut off. Even in peacetime, things weren't better. Cities reeked, streets were caked with human waste, rotting food, and dead animals. Butchers tossed guts right outside their stalls, tanners dumped chemicals in rivers. There was no garbage pickup, no plumbing, no soap. People rarely bathed, maybe twice a year. Many believed bathing made you sick by opening the pores. Lice, fleas, and worms were just part of the deal. You carried them the way we carry keys. Clothes, scratchy wool or rough linen, 1 or 2 outfits worn until they fell apart. Shoes were thin leather, no soles, no support. Your feet were wet and freezing half the year. Good luck. Houses had no privacy. 1 room for eating, working, and sleeping. Entire families in 1 bed. Inns crammed strangers together too. You'd wake up next to someone you'd never met snoring in your face. Entertainment, public executions, animal fights, traveling performers if you were lucky. Otherwise, you stared at a wall or listened to old men tell stories about demons and comets. Superstition ran everything. People feared witches, cursed objects, and bad omens. A sneeze could mean impending doom. A solar eclipse, end of the world, and good luck getting news. No internet, no newspapers. Word traveled by foot. Something could happen 30 miles away and you'd hear about it 2 months later. So yeah, medieval life wasn't a Disney fairy tale. It was dirty, brutal, and painfully short. You weren't thriving, you were just trying not to die today. Still think you'd last 24 hours? Go ahead, try it.